on the 2 millimeter shift. I just wanted to pop in and try to live up to my commitment to posting some of this kind of stuff every single day. So hopefully that's enjoyable. I did learn something with this tool. On Facebook, I have to go and actually changed my audience on Facebook after I go live. And I kind of chatted with support about it and told them that was ridiculous. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So here's the deal. I I consume quite a bit of YouTube, like podcasts and listening to experts talk about things and whatnot. So Tom Bilyeu is somebody that I do watch his podcasts from time to time, watch his interviews, all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't say he's in my top, not because he's not good, just you get into your grooves and you tend to stay there, and then it's like, oh yeah, there's that person too, right? But he made a post that I wanted to read to you guys because it hit me differently than this conversation has hit me in the past. And I thought maybe it would hit you differently and it was worth talking about, right? So here's what he said. He said, Tony Robbins once said, setting goals is the first step to turning the invisible into the visible. Here's the goal setting framework that Tom Bilyeu used to build a $1 billion company. He calls it the zero-based identity protocol, right? So this is goal setting, but there's a slightly different spin on it, and I have a few different thoughts on it, especially as somebody who has had a very love-hate relationship with goals over the years, right? So he says, recently I watched the two co-founders hit a wall at $2.1 million. And it wasn't because their market or their competition, it was because their goals weren't demanding enough transformation. Now, this is one of those things where you sometimes see these posts, right, where people go, your goals should be so big they scare you. But what does that really mean, right? Like that's pretty subjective. Like only you know what a goal that could scare you means in that way. But I think Tom's onto something here is that if your goal is like to get to a financial number, it's not really demanding that much of you. Like there's a clear path to a financial number. There's not a lot of innovation usually that has to happen there. Lots of people have done it is another way to say it, right? So there's a roadmap. Maybe I'm being a little reductionist with that, but I think you know what I mean. He says their identity was the bottleneck. Goals aren't just targets to hit, they are demands to become a different person. And this is where reading this, it started hitting me a little bit because I have a tendency to look at like, okay, well, what's my core competency and what's this mean? So what am I good at? What am I able to contribute based on those things? And furthermore, like, what does it mean to become a different person, right? He says the bigger your goal, the more unrecognizable you will become to achieve it. And here's how to ensure your identity matches your goal's demands. Set a goal your current identity can't achieve, right? Now, I want you to think about this. For me, what goes through my head on this is like you could imagine a child, right? Let's do something like really strange and arbitrary, a little off the wall, right? You could imagine a 5-year-old child wanting to grow up to be a fireman, right? Well, as a 5-year-old child, it's impossible for you to be a fireman, right? It's literally a goal bigger than your current identity could achieve. And they're, as an adult, becoming a fireman, quite admirable and quite physically and mentally demanding and all of that, it's achievable, right? I don't want to make it sound like it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a high accomplishment, but it's also achievable as an adult, right? It's completely unachievable as a 5-year-old child, right? So I think as an adult, you almost have to think the same way as that 5-year-old child in terms of identity. Who would you actually have to become to attain this goal, right? And then he goes on to say, for example, instead of scale from 1.2 million to 10 million ARR, set a goal that would require you to become unrecognizable. Better systems won't bridge that revenue gap. You need to become a person worthy of hitting 10 million ARR. Identify your goals' demands. For example, you might need to let go of being a nice boss, fire employees you've known for 3 years, and prioritize business health over individual relationships. Now, this is where it really hit me in a certain way, because I've said this a lot in my career, that I prioritize relationships over transactions. And I think there's good reason to do that, but there's also something involved. If like you're on a mission to create something, it's not your job to cater to anybody else's whims, feelings, desires. And people that detract you from that, they're not aligned with your goal. They're not aligned with where you're going. And if they're not, it's okay to politely ask them to step aside, right? Now, sometimes there's real world implications of that. And I'm not a big fan of firing people. Just it's just one of my quirks, right? So as I look at this and I go, okay, if I'm gonna reassess my last 10 years and look at my next 10 years to what I want to achieve, it's like, man, I got to make some real adjustments in identity. I got to be really okay with, potentially putting people on an evaluation scale that I have been unwilling to do so up until this point, right? And in a certain way, I've already started doing that within my own life before reading this post, but this was kind of an interesting confirmation. He says, your old self must die for your new self to be born. He says, write a new code. The brain has the computing power it needs. You just need better software. And he goes on to say, what beliefs do you need to install? What habits do you need to code? And what new patterns do you need to program? This is really, really important. And I think the thing that hit me most is this idea of being okay with becoming a new person. We tend to, at least in my experience, we tend to hold on to who we are, right? Tony Robbins also said the most powerful force in human consciousness is one's need to remain consistent with their identity, right? That means like whatever you have as an identity, I am statements, right? I am this way, I'm not that way. These kind of things, you tend to remain very consistent with them. That's sort of core programming. I think this post from Tom is challenging us to think about, man, is there a different core programming we'd like to operate from? And what does that mean? For me, it goes into what does that mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and maybe even physically, right? There are things you're going to have to do, but I think there's a good reminder in here is that your brain can handle it. Like you've got the computing power. I don't care who you are. You've got the computing power. It's just a matter of whether or not you're operating it the way that it needs to operate, right? A really good computer can operate a video game like Pong, or it can operate something that's crazy on resources, and was a big deal for a long time. Cyberpunk, right, was a video game that was like super heavy on resources. The same computer can run both of those programs and do it well, right? So it's like, which one are you willing to run within yourself? And then he goes on to say, install and debug. Most people try to run old and new programs simultaneously. This crashes the system. Instead, start your new identity immediately. Watch for old patterns and debug ruthlessly. No legacy code allowed. If reading with this resonates with you, you're not alone. I'm currently working with founders stuck between 1 million and 100 million, and I've noticed some fascinating, without fail, the ones who scale morph into an entirely new identity, right? So the whole point here is, how do you decide it's okay to move into a new identity? This is what I sort of took away from it. And probably I'm overanalyzing it. Probably I'm overthinking it, right? Because I tend to do that. But I also tend to come up with some interesting things that I can appreciate from myself when I do that. And the big thing here is like there is a possibility for you to just decide to be different in any circumstance. That's all the identity would be. It's just a decision on how you're going to act and react in a certain circumstance. And I remember a number of years ago, I mapped out a whole sort of framework that was called Build Your Own Champion. And the idea came from, I was listening to something on YouTube, right? I forget who it was now. And they were telling this story of Muhammad Ali, right? And Muhammad Ali had lost a fight. I believe it was to Joe Frazier. I'm not sure exactly who it was to, but there was a post-fight interview. And the person asked Muhammad Ali, says, what was going through your mind when you hit the canvas? And Muhammad Ali, without missing a beat, says, the canvas is no place for a champion. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I went like, oh, that's such an identity statement, right? Like, he could have been thinking about anything in that time. Like, oh, if my footwork would have been better, if I hadn't underestimated my opponent, if I just trained a little harder or longer, maybe I should have done better with my diet. Like all sorts of different things could have come through. And he says, the canvas is no place for a champion. After a loss where it like clearly proves that, like you could argue that it clearly proves, well, maybe you're not a champion then, right? And his identity was so strong that he went, no, that's like it's not even fathomable. It does not compute, right? The programming, the code in his being said something different. And there is a way to code yourself to be the champion you want to be. And I think that's kind of what resonated with me with this post and why I wanted to share it. So the next questions there is like, for you personally, if you're going to achieve a goal, right? First, what is that goal? And two, is it big enough to actually take you to a new place? And here's what I want to leave you with. Imagine getting to the end of your life and you're looking back on all of it and you're going, man, I really liked these parts of myself and I really liked how I did that, but I really had this aching to do something more, to do something bigger, better, something I knew I was capable of, that in the echoes back there in my mind, I know someday I could do, and I never got to do it. And I'm willing to bet in that moment you look back and you go, it's because I was never willing to become something different. Myron Golden summed this up really, really well. He says, what does a seed need to do to become a tree? The first step is to cease being a seed. You got to quit being that seed. And this is a powerful reminder for me, because I think another reason this resonated with me is maybe you feel this way as well. I've been holding on to a little bit too much of who I've always been and not really putting enough focus on who I actually am capable of being. Even though I tend to do it a lot, I don't do it with the intensity of this. So here's what I'll give you. Uh, uh, Take some time today, this week, whatever, and sort out what those goals actually are and look at how you could actually, who you need to transform into to be able to achieve those goals, and start working in those directions, right? I did another video for 2mm Shift that says goal setting is BS, essentially, because proven systems will get you there. Proven systems will get you there, but you also might need to become somebody different to be able to execute on those systems. So I think it's a great post. I'm going to share it in the comment below, so you got a link to it over on YouTube, just to make sure to give Tom credit on it, and you can read it for yourself. Take care, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll look forward to seeing you stretch into the person you need to become to achieve the things that are deep in your heart and spirit. Talk soon.